welcome back to another episode of Say How It Is. Where we are joined by Kieran, who is the manager of the Oddballs Foundation, and Jamie, who is incoming, the Reading ambassador for... No, wait.
Start again.
You're going to have to start that again. We'll clip that bit and I'll just go back to Jamie. Jamie, who is the Reading Uni's ambassador for the Oddballs Foundation. Up and coming.
Yeah. Well done, you smashed that.
Thank you.
Good job.
You. That was take 2, by the way. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks. I know you committed to a 5:30 train to be here today, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I actually can't get my head around that. I don't think I've ever gotten a train at 5:30 in my life.
We do need to buy him lunch after this.
Yeah, we do. And
He's
dinner.
a student as well.
Yeah. Start off, for anyone listening who firstly doesn't know about Oddballs, the company, but also the Oddballs Foundation, where did it all start and where did it sort of stem from?
Yeah, so Oddballs, the underwear brand, was launched in 2014 up in Newcastle, so up in the northeast, essentially as an underwear brand selling brightly coloured and pretty wacky, with wacky designs on them, to essentially use the underwear as a vehicle to get people talking about testicular cancer, and the business would then donate proceeds from those sales to testicular cancer charities within the UK. Had a really successful launch, and as you can imagine, it resonated very well within the sports community, particularly within the rugby world. The guys who set up the business thought, look, this is a real opportunity for us to maybe do a bit more. And so in 2015, they set up the Oddballs Foundation as sort of like the main charity affiliated to the brand. And that was sort of... The foundation would then take on the sort of key messaging around delivering and raising awareness of testicular cancer. So the underwear brand now is probably worth mentioning. They've sort of evolved over time, and they don't just stand for testicular cancer. They support a whole range of different charities and do amazing work. I think they've donated over £1 million since 2014 to different charities. So yeah, it's a pretty
epic.
Yeah, it's a sizable operation they've got going, and anyone I speak to now is definitely, particularly within the sporting world anyway, but has definitely heard of Oddballs.
We are committed Oddballs. We have ridiculous...
I'm wearing them right now, are you?
No, I'm not. Purely based on my outfit choice. I know I actually should have worn them. I'm feeling embarrassed that I haven't worn them for this episode. However, we have a ridiculous amount of Oddball pants, don't we?
Yeah, I have a section in my drawer just for Oddballs.
Specifically for Oddballs, yeah.
Yeah, lots of people do.
Do you?
I'm wearing them now.
Yes!
Jamie should be as well.
I am letting the team down. I'm actually embarrassed. I'm really sorry.
I can't believe you're not wearing them.
I know. Why wouldn't I do that? I think it's because I'm just in a dress and, whatever.
Anyway.
Not that you can't wear Oddballs in a dress, but where are we going with this?
No, I know. I can't remember where we were.
Yeah, I suppose like the main thing that between Oddballs, the business, and the Oddballs Foundation is we want to show as much clarity that one is a business that supports a whole range of different charities, has a separate team, separate accounts, and then the Oddballs Foundation, which is a registered charity, again, a separate team, has a different mission, but there is always going to be that synergy between the two. So the business came first, set up the charity, and yeah, that's sort of... The charity's now grown and evolved, which I'm sure we'll dive into throughout this, but yeah, that's sort of where we're at the moment.
You mentioned your mission, so do you mind just elaborating on what is your mission at the Oddballs Foundation?
So we've got a very simple message, and we're set up to raise awareness of testicular cancer. We know that testicular cancer is one of the most curable forms of cancer when detected early. So from like a research point of view, the treatment's very good. So for us, it's about how we can engage with as many people as possible, particularly within that demographic of 15 and 49, which is the cancer's most prevalent in. And yeah, trying to break down the stigma around feeling uncomfortable chatting about your balls, bollocks, nuts, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's for us that there is a taboo around, having that conversation. It's a difficult thing to talk about, but how can we educate people on the importance of regular checking, and familiarising yourself with your body, and then trying to instill some confidence in people to speak to their doctor and get checked out if they do have a concern. So our main message is really about education, raising awareness, and trying to break down that stigma, which I know you guys are doing a fantastic job here with lots of different causes and difficult subjects to have. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. And where did your role begin within the charity? So what drew you to the role?
Yeah, so when I went to university down in Exeter a fair few years ago now, must have been 2017, and a family friend of mine was actually the brand manager of Oddballs Apparel, so the underwear brand, and at that point, this would have been 2017. He reached out to me and said, "Look, we're the Oddballs Foundation at that stage didn't have any staff or employees. It was sort of just running alongside the business, and people from the business would keep it ticking over." He reached out to me and said, "Look, we want to set up this university ambassador program. Would you be keen to be one of the ambassadors down in Exeter?" And I said, "Yeah, look, I'd heard of Oddballs, the underwear brand, through the rugby world, rugby player myself, so understood sort of what they did. Didn't have the greatest understanding of how the difference between the brand and the charity at the time, because it was very early in the sort of charities years. But I just said, look, I'll get involved. And whilst I was at university down in Exeter, I represented the charity. Would be going into like the local community, going into schools, the workplace, professional sports clubs. I went into army barracks, like all different places, and delivering presentations on testicular cancer, handing out resources that would educate people. Going to events, putting on fundraisers. So it was quite a unique thing to do at university alongside degree, the rugby down at Exeter, which was like pretty much professional.
Full on, yeah.
Which was amazing and absolutely loved that. So it was just trying to manage it all. And then, upon graduating, it was sort of COVID was just rearing its head and I didn't really know what I wanted to do.
What was your degree in?
Exercise and sports science.
Yeah.
Had to think that. That was cool. I'm not using that degree now. But and then sort of was thinking about what I wanted to do. I always wanted to sort of play professional rugby. That was my dream. Don't get me wrong, had opportunities to do that, and sort of life evolved, I suppose. And my next route was like going down the teaching path. I'd always really enjoyed working with sort of like young adults and children, and then I actually had a conversation with my parents and said, look, I would love to be a teacher, but I don't think I want to step right into that yet. So how can, what do you think? And then it was actually my mum said, look, you've really enjoyed representing the charity as an ambassador. Why don't you write them a letter and say, look, this is my plan. If you hire me, I'll do this. And so I did that.
Nice.
And sort of, created a role for myself, which was was cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, so I suppose on that point, it's like if you don't ask,
you don't get.
Yeah, I love that.
So, and I've been really fortunate, sort of over the last 5 years, to be sort of progressing through the charity, and it's grown, pretty rapidly over the last few years, which is brilliant, and that's been alongside the growth of the business too. So, that's sort of where I am today, and it's. Who knows where it's going to go in the future, but we've got lots of exciting plans. So thank you.
Good for you.
Very cool. And obviously we touched on the uni ambassador program there, which is where you come in, Jamie.
Yeah.
How did you, so let's strip it back a bit and go through your story and why it is that you wanted to get involved with the Oddballs Foundation.
That's a good question. So pretty much it started in 2019. Basically I was just a normal swimmer, like training as much as I normally did 5 times a week. And in the situation, I sort of, at the time I was doing as well as I could in the sport. And then out of nowhere, sort of, I think one day I got hit in the hip. I think it was 4 times in a row. So sort of a sign. And there was pain. And in that situation, I was like naive to it. I was like, no, it's fine. It's fine. I eventually got round to tell my parents. And then I was like, right, I might need to go and deal with this. Still naive in the situation to what it could be. And then went in after school one day, went to the GP, got sent from the GP to the A&E at one hospital, then got sent to another hospital. And then the next day I was diagnosed, with testicular cancer.
And you were 14 then?
Yeah.
Which is an unbelievably young age to have to go through something like that. And you mentioned the naivety. How did it feel? Firstly, I can imagine it was pretty scary being almost passed around doctor to doctor because you're thinking, I'm naive to this right now, but I'm being passed around left, right and centre. What was going through your head at that time?
Not really that much, to be honest. I think my mum, she's a physiotherapist, so she sort of had a clue in what might be going on. I think she realised when I got called into an oncology department, but I was sort of naive until the words were said, really, and then there's that realisation that this is going to be a very different situation to what I was expecting to be in at 14, but yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I can't imagine what that must have been like. And I think as a person, how do you think that has shaped now your sort of the years following that and now the want to have the involvement with the Oddballs Foundation? Sorry.
I think with testicular cancer, there's not enough sort of said. Like testicular cancer, I feel it's like two words and like separate different things. You've got the cancer, which is such a sort of big word in itself with a lot of people. And then I think there's the naivety at such a young age about testicular cancer and like balls. There's not enough conversation in schools about that sort of topic. And to be honest, I felt embarrassed that it happened to me. I didn't feel confident about speaking about it. And to be honest, that's where the Oddballs Foundation comes in, and they do an amazing job in going into these schools. And, you know, if you can deliver a presentation which encourages one person to, you know, go home and check themselves and, you know, so maybe get something sorted if there is an issue or not, then that's the positive impact that I want to have in the role.
And I think you mentioned it there, like not many people would expect a 14-year-old to be diagnosed with testicular cancer, and I think that is one thing that you maybe expect that in older men. Like, how did you deal with that as a 14-year-old? Like, did it affect like your school life? How were your friends? Were they supportive? Because I suppose maybe people at 14 may not even understand or never heard of what testicular cancer is. So how was that experience for you as a 14-year-old?
At 14, I sort of went into a shell and I was quite embarrassed or scared to tell people. It took me quite a long time, but the people that were around me were there supporting. And, you know, when it came round to telling them, you know, they took it like they were respectful and they understood. And, you know, that in that situation, the strongest people around you come in a circle and it becomes very special.
That's really lovely. And what was your journey from diagnosis at that point? What were the next steps? Sort of where did it go from there?
So initial diagnosis, went home, a bit lost, but it all happened very quickly. Had a surgery to remove the primary site. My cancer had metastasized, so into my pelvis and my lungs. So then that was the next shock sort of thing. And then I remember one day getting picked up from school on a Friday and then put on the ward and put in onto chemotherapy. And then that's the start of the journey, where I think within 3 weeks from diagnosis to you're now on the ward and you're going to have to fight it.
And so then you started chemo. What was that experience like?
During chemotherapy, I've always wanted to like sort of set myself targets. So, you know, the first week you're all sort of strong and you're like, yeah, you know, I'm going to do a couple push-ups today. And then that doesn't become possible the further you go on. So then it becomes, my big thing was I didn't want to eat at my bed. I wanted to eat at the cafeteria where everyone else could come to just feel normal. I just felt like at 14, like so different to everyone else, that to have the opportunity to be able to sit with other people, I was like, that's my target. But as it progresses, you sort of, the emotional side starts to progress. And I would just remember moments when I was specifically in my last week where you're just like, if I go, then I go. And I've accepted that. But that's the sort of stuff that goes through because you become so weak. And just sitting there and just not knowing what's going to happen is so hard. But, you know, when you have the people around you who care, like my mum and dad who were there for me all the way through, and the wider family and the people who supported them, then it becomes a lot easier.
Oh my God, listen to that. Like, I can't even imagine, like, I have so much respect for you. One, for being open and honest about it, but I can't imagine how difficult that must have been, especially at a young age. Like, if you're older, it would have been tough regardless, but I suppose you would have had a bit more life experience to be able to maybe develop your resilience or your strength, but to be able to go through that at 14 and be able to sit here now saying, like, you were setting yourself targets. Like, that is in such an incredible mindset. And to be like, oh, you know, you want to go and sit and have dinner like everybody else and be normal, like, that is a really strong and powerful mindset to be in. But like you said, you're only human, and like it's going to get to a point where when something's quite difficult time and time again, yeah, it is going to affect you emotionally. How long was that chemotherapy process? Like, how long did you have to go through chemo for?
So I was on a trial initially. So I did, I think it was 4 rounds of weeks, so 6 days. And then I'd have a week off and then back on it. And then to deal with the tumour in my lung, then I was having chemotherapy once a week. I think for 3 months in total, it was overall. And then after that, it sadly didn't all go. So I had a surgery. And I think that was the biggest point where it was just like overwhelmed me to the point. It was a 10-hour surgery. My parents, I remember my mum talking about it after, because again, I was naive to it. I was just, you just feel in third person all the time. And I think my mum said for a CT scan, there were 9 people in the room, and there were people coming to me before I went into my surgery asking, can I come into the surgery? Because it was the first time they'd done it in a child in the UK.
Wow.
So
oh my
it was a crazy experience. But it's also so hard, I think, now, the sort of after going through it, in that moment you're in fight or flight, and you go into the process of, I'm going to fight through this. And then now coming back further along, it's been a process to go through it, but yeah.
We did an episode earlier on in the season with the charity Morgan's Army, where we had Morgan's mother on, Natalie, where she spoke around life after cancer, and she spoke around that their charity, its focus is also to support life afterwards, because she said that, like, you know, there's this support going through it, through diagnosis, through treatment, but then once you potentially get the all clear, or you potentially like her family with Morgan, like they unfortunately lost Morgan, where's the support from there on? Yeah. So like, how do you feel that was for you? Like you said, like you now living this life now, like on reflection, is it after that process of treatment and diagnosis where, like you said, you were in third person, is it the reflection afterwards where you're like, wow, that I actually went through that, and then now I'm struggling to deal with it because I didn't realise at the time this what I was actually going through.
I think there's a whole like load of emotions that you go through throughout the process of the chemotherapy. You know, there's the sort of like, why me? There's also the, you know, what's going to happen. Then after, you know, you get the all clear, then it's the like, why me again? Like just seeing people on the ward, there are so many sick people, and you think, well, why did I, you know, survive and maybe other people didn't? And, you know, and that's emotion, but then you've got to go through and think, you know, you've got to go and live it to the full. But there were some people that I met, you know, that you don't know, and it's hard, the emotional side.
How old are you now?
19.
Very mature for a 19-year-old.
Took the words out of my mouth.
And again, yes, because I was going to say, do you feel like you had to grow up so much faster because this is an extreme, you know, traumatic thing to go through at such a young age?
My family would say that I changed a lot. I was, not focused before. Like I sort of, whenever like we go to a parents' evening, it was always Jamie's on a different planet, or Jamie's not like really paying attention, not reaching his potential, and then coming back in a school setting. That was really hard. I tried to like fit in as much as possible. Like, I'd wear a hat to school to cover because I was so like insecure about having no hair. But then I was like, I do have steroid face, so it's pretty evident that I do. But it was the process to get to that, and the people made
the difference.
Yeah.
So how old are you when you went back to school? As in, like, once, like, what age were you then?
So it was going into 2020. So
wait, let me do the maths. No, hang on a minute.
Yeah. So.
Oh yes.
Let me do the maths. COVID.
Yes. So started my chemotherapy journey in June. Went back to school. I tried to go back in the September, and that obviously wasn't going to happen. But eventually started going back in like once a week, maybe 2 times a week in December, and then obviously COVID hit, and then I think that was the biggest thing. I felt like I was going back into society, and then
it took it away from you again.
when you're at risk, then you're like tucked away, and then you're tucked away for a lot longer than everyone else. And I think that's the hard part, is when you just feel like you're going back in, then it's not the way.
So how was that the first couple of months of lockdown? I didn't even click, but then I was like, of course, you're like, if you're in that vulnerable category, it really was like you're on complete lockdown. How was that for you?
I think it's really hard. Like, to begin with, it was all right because everyone's in the sort of same situation. I think there's the previous, obviously, not being able to get involved before, like a couple of months before, then going into lockdown, it's a bit harder. But like, the people were always there, you know. I had friends, you know, who would still make the same effort, and we were all like talking. But then when it became the point where people could go out, it was harder to, because obviously my immune system wasn't great, so anything that could happen would affect me. But yeah, I think the emotional side sort of started building up, and I started to deal with it in that time. But I really don't think I came to full terms with it until I sort of left home at university. And those first sort of 6 months, I really came to terms with it, and I thought it was a great opportunity to, you know, use the platform that Oddballs provide to maybe just try and help others who go through that experience.
So that's really interesting. So did you reach out to the charity to have support for yourself, or did you reach out to them to say that you'd like to get involved? Like, how was that process of getting completely involved with them?
Well, I'd never heard of the Oddballs Foundation until you go into university, and obviously the funky merchandise stands out.
Yes.
Funky cows.
I had people who didn't know about the foundation, but I was like, this is exactly what I want to get involved in. I think the mass in schools, not enough is said. I think obviously you're dealing with people who are young and they're naive and they don't see the serious side of it, but you know, you need to promote that sort of conversation because it does affect people. You know, in that moment I'm thinking, when I got diagnosed, I'm the only person in the world with testicular cancer, but actually there's loads of other people, and
it's about knowing about it, right? To make, like you mentioned earlier, that you felt like, you know, you felt really alone, you felt ashamed, but like that's probably because you didn't know that there was actually other people that were going through it too. And I think it's really important that you're saying that. And like I mentioned earlier, I think there's this like idea and concept around testicular cancer only happens to people that are men in an older age. But it's, you know, you imagine that there was more information going into schools, and like you're saying, and people like you that will reassure that there are other people, but there's support for you and understanding around what it is, and it, you know, that there's a high chance you're going to be okay.
So going back to the University Ambassador Programme, and Kieran, we can touch on this with you. What exactly is, so obviously we know the Oddballs Foundation mission, how does that then filter into that University Ambassador, sort of the roles? Is it 50 universities?
Yeah, so we've currently got 50 students
crazy.
across the UK who represent the charity. Cool. Well, the sort of idea of the Ambassador Programme came around from the fact that testicular cancer does most commonly affect young people, young men, and we should be getting other young people speaking about it to try and break down that stigma and sort of hopefully resonate with other young people. And university students also have a lot of free time, to put it quite bluntly. So, it's a great opportunity for the students because, like, from a career perspective as well, not just from like the cause, it's going to develop the students and build confidence, public speaking skills, organisation, time management, all like the key things you want gradually when graduating and going into professional life. But from like the cause perspective, having a young person, for example, like Jamie, who's, you know, got a personal story to tell, or like myself, I've not been diagnosed with testicular cancer, but hopefully when I go into schools, or when Jamie goes into schools, or any of our students going into schools in particular, they can really resonate with those younger audience. Because when I was at school, if you've got, sounds a bit rude, but when you have someone of a potentially like an older age who's talking about something that you might not switch on to fully, but when you've got someone who's slightly closer to your age, maybe looks quite cool when they're coming in and can make a real impact on you, and you hopefully it's going to be memorable, and that message is going to stick with that young audience for the rest of their lives. So from the university students' perspective, they do have a lot to to manage with the role, like booking in the talks and visiting schools, going into the workplace. It can be quite daunting alongside your university life, academics, sport, social life. But yeah, we've found particularly sort of the last few years as we've grown, like we're going into over 1,000 schools each year and delivering these presentations. So we're reaching a pretty sizable audience there, and we do regularly get teachers or parents or sometimes even the students themselves reaching out to us on social media, saying, look, I've listened to your talk, I've checked myself, I've discovered something, and I've gone and seen the doctor.
That's what's important, right?
So we are making an evident difference there, and it's those sort of messages really drill it into you and make you proud, because obviously the work that we're doing is sticking with people,
saving people's lives.
And so ultimately it is saving people's lives. But I think from a student perspective, having been an ambassador myself, but also now sort of managing the charity, and I've got 2 colleagues who work with me who sort of directly manage the university ambassador program. It's incredible to see at the beginning of the year when the university students apply for the role, because it is a role that's become probably one of the most in-demand roles at university now. We get a crazy amount of applications, so it's trying to select the right people. And at some universities you get 4 or 5 people who would do a fantastic job, but unfortunately we're only in a position at the moment to just have 1 student at certain universities. So but yeah, it's just incredible to see the transition of that student, and when they finish the role they're just like another person, because they've stood up in front of a whole range of different audiences talking about a subject which is difficult to talk about. And yeah, the growth from a individual's perspective is incredible, but also like the impact that they're having on the audiences is it's just cool to see.
And Jamie, how does it feel, like obviously from your own personal experience, is this something why you wanted to get involved with something like this? Because like you've been through it yourself, and like how it feels, so you want to make sure, I'm guessing, that you want to help as many people as possible.
Yeah, I think when you're diagnosed at 14 and you're in a school setting and you don't feel the sort of comfortable and confident to talk about it, then a lot needs to be done. And obviously other people have different situations, everyone's unique. But when I just heard what the Oddballs Foundation did in terms of going into schools, it's just to have that impact and to have the ability to just present the information is just what I wanted to do. And I thought it was perfect. It was like a perfect match.
And I guess it's exactly what you needed at that time. And it's like, if I can imagine if you put yourself back in your 14-year-old shoes, if something like that had been said in school, you're like, yes, exactly. This is exactly what I need. And what do those the like presentations and the talks? How do they work in terms of what are the contents of them? Because I can imagine it's probably one of those things you have to almost soften the people who are listening first, because if you go straight in, people might close themselves off.
Yeah, so. It's obviously, given the nature of the topic, depending on what audience you go into, it's going to be received differently. When you go into schools, there's lots of giggling. The maturity levels are different, but when you open up with the presentation, there are in that school demographic, as I say, lots of giggles. But as you gradually go through, at certain stages, you can hear a pin drop, and you're the only one speaking, and they're all dialed in, they're listening, you can tell. And then we just have like a little quiz at the end that they're all putting their hands up because they're engaged. And we do like to talk about the subject in a reasonably sort of informal and light-hearted way, whilst still resonating on the seriousness of the subject. But we think that's probably the best way to help evoke the conversations, get people talking. Throughout the presentation, we're going through the key basics of testicular cancer, the signs and symptoms, how it's diagnosed, how it's treated, and some key facts around that, what you can do to try and keep on top of your health, and some simple things that you can do to put yourself in a good position if you do discover something. And then, just bits about what we do as a charity to hopefully inspire that generation, or if we're going into a corporate setting, hopefully try and encourage that business to support the charity in some way, whether it's through a fundraiser or social media campaign, whatever it might be. There's lots of different ways that people can get behind it. But But yeah, I mean, it's really about just trying to break down the barrier of the conversation and giving people the right tools to start checking themselves on a monthly basis. A really simple message, but not many people do check themselves.
What, just to give people that could be listening an idea around what you say are the symptoms, like if we can just educate people listening around what would be the symptoms that you would say people could experience, or something that they would need to be potentially taking further advice on?
Yeah, so within our presentation and a lot of our messaging is there are sort of two more common signs and symptoms of testicular cancer. You've got like a lump or a bump, which could be if you're feeling your testicle like the size of a pea.
Or it could be that small.
Yeah, it could be that small, or it could be bigger. Lump or a bump, or a painless swelling. So over time, when one of your testicles gets significantly bigger than the other.
And that could not be painful.
Painless,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So it doesn't have to be painful. One thing to sort of note on that is that it's very common for people with testicles, guys, to have one testicle that is bigger than the other anyway, just naturally, like it is for women to have one breast that's a different shape to the other. So this is why we try and encourage people to check themselves regularly, so you can familiarise yourselves with your body and notice something that does change. There are other signs and symptoms too, like a dull ache, sharp pain, which may sort of come and go. But if lots of people may have a sharp pain, experience it, and it doesn't come again for a few months or weeks, let's say, and they ignore it. They don't think it's anything, but really it could be something. So a lot of our messaging is, if you discover anything or feel anything that just doesn't feel right, maybe you can't even describe what that is. It might be that it just doesn't feel right to you. Speak to your doctor, get an appointment booked in and get it checked out, because it's always better to be safe than sorry. You're not wasting anybody's time, but you are potentially saving your life. So it's literally free to do. So why wouldn't you?
And I know you mentioned the barrier, and this is a good question for the both of you. Like, why do you think that there is this stigma and taboo around this conversation with guys? Like, I know, Jim, you mentioned when you were 14, you're like ashamed of it, but like, why do you think it's something that people struggle to talk about?
Obviously, depending on what sort of groups you're in, from a guy's perspective, lots of guys have this sort of tough bravado that they're invincible. And don't get me wrong, I'm pretty sure that at certain points in my life I'm like that. But if we can just help break that down, make these conversations easier, which we are doing, but it's going to take time. And just try and turn the narrative. It's okay if you do discover something, but let's talk about it. Let's get it checked. And when I speak to a lot of people who have been diagnosed with testicular cancer, a lot of them come through with the same sort of theme. It's like it can be difficult to put your pride to one side and take that first step. That's almost the most difficult thing to do. Once you've had that conversation with either your family, your friends, or your support network, and then seen your doctor, lots of people who have been diagnosed often say they've had this weight drop off them. And lots of people, when you talk about other sort of illnesses, or whether it's mental health or physical illnesses, once you've spoken about that with people, you're not on your own. You have people around you, and I think having a support network, as Jamie touched upon, whether it's family and friends, school friends, university friends, colleagues, teammates, particularly within like the sporting scene, it can be huge, can make such a big difference, because everyone's journey with cancer is ultimately different. Everyone's individual. Their body's going to react differently to another person. They're going to have different circumstances. Like Jamie, after his diagnosis, was suddenly had COVID, so was seen as high risk and couldn't then socialise, or maybe lost that sort of side of it after having gone through the chemotherapy. Having that support network's huge. So I think sort of gone on a little bit there, but like, testicular cancer is a physical cancer, but there's also massive mental battles that come with it too. So hopefully if we can help break down the stigma, raise more awareness around it, get more people checking themselves, we're going to ultimately help people mentally and physically.
I want to go backwards a bit, back to you, Jim.
You didn't let him answer. Huh? You didn't let him answer the barrier question.
Okay, we can get to that. So,
he's about to speak then,
sorry,
Gwen.
but I just, this is how my brain works. It just has a thought and then needs to get it out. And I'm probably going to forget I've forgotten it. No, I haven't
Yeah.
forgotten it. So when, obviously, you had to come out of school, and I can imagine your grades and your school life and that kind of thing took a hit and had an impact. How then did you sort of think, right, I'm going to try and rebuild this and obviously get to university? Because I think that's a huge thing in itself, that you were able to, in such a short space of time, not only, you know, rebuild yourself and think, okay, I'm going to get over this and I'm going to get through this, but also make it to university and now be in that position where you can go and work with Oddballs. So what was the process in sort of getting to that step and getting into university?
So obviously went back to school in year 11, so it was the big year, but
Crunch
it was
time.
kind of cancelled because of COVID, so I got a bit lucky there. But no, so going in, I did one of my mocks the day before my surgery,
Wow.
and I did another getting taken. So that sort of side, like I felt like at GCSEs, obviously didn't perform the way I wanted to, but I think I got an excuse for that. But
I think it's justifiable.
and then went to a different school for sixth form, and you know when you go there and you're not. I think when I was at my previous school, you know it was a big old state school, so you're sort of known for having cancer, and then to change schools and no one knows who you are, you can sort of not hold that against you, so you can do what you want to do, you can achieve what you want to do, and maybe not get in trouble for looking out the window. So I just went with a different attitude. My attitude completely changed because of cancer. Went with the objective of, you know, if it fails, then you can go again. You know, that's the whole cancer journey. If a drug doesn't work, you try a new one. No one sort of exactly knows how it's going to work, but it will work. And so did the A-levels and then, decided to go to university.
Was one thing I wanted to ask is, do you think this has affected your perspective? Like now, like, do you think that now you look at life a bit differently, or you've got a different mindset of what you thought you could have had pre-cancer because of like the position you're in? Like, you know, you mentioned where you got diagnosed, you didn't know what the outcome was going to be. So like, how is your perspective now with life? I know you're only 19, but like, you're so mature for a 19-year-old and you've been through so much for a 19-year-old. Do you know what I mean? So how has that now shaped your perspective?
I don't want to get too emotional, but like
it's okay. I
too
cry
deep.
on every episode, so it makes you feel any more comfortable. I cry on every episode, so if you cry, I'll be crying with you, no doubt. All right.
But my perspective on life sort of changed going through sort of treatment on that last week when I felt so weak of my big cycle of chemotherapy. And I sort of I looked back on everything I'd done and I was like comfortable with everything I'd achieved. And I was like, you know what, I'm happy with the life I've lived. And, you know, obviously when you're so close to finishing chemotherapy, maybe that's not the best attitude to have, but I just felt so weak and I was like, you know, if I go, I go. But then when you don't, then you sort of start again and you've like, right, you only get this once. And then,
You get me, I'm going.
you only get this life once, and the small things in life that they just don't bug me anymore. I think my girlfriend gets quite annoyed when I don't take stuff too seriously, the small stuff. But like I just feel like you just need to just go out and, you know, live it and not see any like. Everything happens for a reason in that sense, and it's got to go with a different attitude.
I'll speak. I think goodness. I like having had similar conversations to people like yourself. It's so inspiring to hear someone say that almost that they're grateful for the things that they've gone through, no matter how bad, because it does give a different perspective. And I think for people listening that are fortunate enough to not gone through something like that, listen and take that on board, because life is too short, and the not sweating the small stuff is so important, because it can be so easy to just be like, oh, I'm in traffic, I can't believe this, like I'm gonna be late. But why does it actually matter? Because it sometimes does take something so significant to happen to really put like a stop in the way for you to actually have to reflect and be like, wow. But normally that doesn't happen until someone's a lot older.
But I also can't believe that you like, I just think we spoke about it so much on these on season 1 and 2, but you know, it's so easy to play the victim and be like, yeah, I know you mentioned about being why me, but like to be in the mindset as a teenager to be like, well, I've accepted it, it's okay, like if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. Like that's what got me when I was listening to you, because I was like, I can't even imagine as a teenager how difficult that must have been, but also for you at the time, you were just like, it's okay. And I just think I'm just in awe of that kind of, like I said, like I have so much respect for you to, like, you're a teenager and like that's just what got me going, to be completely honest. Like but now, like, who is Jamie now? Like, I know you mentioned that you felt like you were the kid with cancer in school, but like cancer doesn't define you. Like tell us about like what do you enjoy doing? Like what are your plans? Do you like now want to be like, I want to do this and this. I want to become the Prime Minister. Like, do you know what I mean? Like what?
Hey, I vote for you.
Yeah. I've been crying my flag, like, please vote for Jamie. Like, what is this new life now going to look like for you? What do you like to do on the weekend? Tell us.
I'd say sort of the new life is sort of that, like you said, cancer doesn't define you, it shapes you. And for me, until I went to university, I felt cancer defined me. And then I came out while at university and realised it doesn't define me, it's just shaped me. It's taught me like lessons. It's realised, you know, like your sort of your close network and people were there for you at like a drop of a hat. And I think the attitude that I go into stuff now is that I want to just try my best at it. If it doesn't work, then I'll be annoyed, I'll be upset, but like you just go again. But I feel like it shaped me for the better. And yeah, like I can't fault anyone who helped me on the journey. Obviously going back to healthcare staff, they were there. You know, just the people along the way that you meet shape the way that you deal with situations. And, you know, I think a big thing is when like people look at you and you go, you went through cancer, so then like they maybe think that I don't account their issues as highly, but the thing is everyone's different, and the fact is that everyone learns something from everyone else. So if someone feels unwell, let's say, then you maybe just a cold, but you can still learn something from them. And you know, everything I feel plays on an even playing ground, because communication's the way to go. Like this podcast, you know, communication and talking about stuff, you learn stuff.
We've spoken in quite a bit. I think we actually mentioned it on every single episode, where we say that like it can be quite difficult sometimes if, like you're saying, like your scenario, like you've been through cancer and then someone may be complaining about a cold, but like it's someone's first experience with something traumatic or difficult, and it's quite hard if you're the person going through that really traumatic thing to be like, are you joking? You got a bloody cold. But like it's also you can waste and lose so much energy like getting annoyed with that person. But like I said, like if you flip that mind to be like, actually that could be that first person's experience with something, or like that they just might not have as much life experience as me to be able to deal with something that they may deem as difficult. Like I think that is really tricky, because a cold to cancer is a completely end of the spectrum, but like I think that is such a mature way to look at it, to be like, well, like you're saying, everybody is different.
And I think like taking lessons from it, that's really interesting, because I've not actually heard of it said like that before. Because like Ffion said, we have spoken about a similar kind of thing with other guests, but actually it's not just having an understanding that is their experience and everything, like everyone experiences things differently, but also I can learn something from the way they may be dealing with what they're going through, whatever that may be. So that's a really interesting sort of perspective and outlook to have on it as well.
So you mentioned really early on that you said you loved to swim and you were swimming all the time. Is that something you got back into? Like, do you like what do you
swim on the weekends?
Is that what you do now?
No, I still swim at university. Met a great group there to get back into it. I sort of stopped to focus on my studies. You know, poor decision there, but getting back into it was a huge thing, because the thing is, I always tried to swim as much as possible during my chemotherapy.
Swimming is hard.
Yeah. And it was, I think the amount of hours that I was there, then I was like, you know what, then maybe I should continue doing it the same way. Maybe not competing as much, but sort of like just doing fun stuff in the pool, sort of thing.
Feeling with normality.
Do you feel like you needed to find like a different purpose to like put your energy into, to kind of leave the negative experience that you were currently facing, and like something like swimming, was that your out or something to be like, do you know what, I'm gonna go and swim, and I'm gonna switch everything else off?
Yeah, no, massively. It's the swimming's always been my sort of outlet in terms of you don't have to talk to anyone, and if your coach starts shouting at you, just put your head underwater.
You know what? I might start swimming
all the time.
But yeah, no, massively. I think everyone's got their outlet. If it's on the rugby pitch, if it's on a hockey pitch, if it's in the pool, even if it's in the library reading, you know, people have an outlet and that's their space. But then obviously, when that was my outlet after, I'm thinking, right, I don't want to go swimming because that was my outlet during chemotherapy and I want to pretend it didn't happen. But yeah, no, back into it now and I'm really enjoying it. Yeah.
Good, nice.
I'm glad. That's really good.
Kieran, I just wanted to ask you, obviously your role now within the Oddballs Foundation, has that, like the experience, probably the people you've met, the people that have been diagnosed, meeting people like Jamie, has that changed your perspective on life? Like, are you a consistent ball checker? Like, do you go to a family dinner and sit everyone down like, right, just having a check in, have you all checked today? Like,
yeah, the Kelly family household. No, I'm not going to get into that. Yeah, I think, look, having spoken to and met a lot of people who have been through different battles with testicular cancer, it definitely resonates and hits home with you. And as we sort of touched upon earlier, like when you do hear the stories of people having, potentially seen one of our check self guides or listened in on one of our workshops and it having made a positive impact in the sense that they've discovered something early and taken the action, it does it just makes you feel proud and privileged to be able to do the work that we're doing. Has it sort of changed my perspective of life? I guess it has. I'd like to think I've always sort of been quite a confident, outgoing and hopefully approachable person, and I just want to make the most of every opportunity I get. And I sort of, as I touched upon earlier, I wouldn't be working for the Oddballs Foundation if I didn't sort of have that direction myself, in a sense, like, don't be afraid to ask for help or for questions, or like if you want to follow a certain job, knock on the door until it opens.
Nice.
So yeah, I guess it has changed my perspective on life in the sense that just make the most of it. But I think I've always sort of had that with me too. But it's amazing hearing different people's experiences and the way that it's shaped their lives. As we said, like, cancer doesn't define you, it shapes you. And I think what a way to make the most of life. Just put a positive spin on it and don't sweat the small stuff, as we've already sort of touched upon. I think particularly with like even work life or rugby commitments, if you miss a tackle, let's move on to the next job. Like there's don't let stuff pile up on you. Speak for help, delegate, ask people to help you out, because people are always there to help you. Like you've always got people around you. So yeah, I mean, make the most of it.
I was interested to find out what your conversations are like with your friendship groups now. Like, obviously you both, like, from your own experience, Jamie, I know this new role that you're going to play in the ambassador role, and then Kieran, your manager role. What was your conversation like with your friendship groups around, like, you both want to, tackle the stigma around this? Do you take that into your friendship conversations?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, my friendship groups, like my main friendship groups, probably like my school friends. I've known some of them since I was as young as I can even remember, but like baby age. So we're very close. Don't get me wrong. We're like to take the mick out of each other, and that's sort of how we sort of operate. But yeah, I mean, we're not afraid of having those conversations and saying, look, lads, like, check your balls. Or one of my friends got diagnosed with not testicular cancer, another form of cancer, a couple of years ago during COVID, and had a really tough time. And that our friendship group was 100% one of the factors that kept him like going and positive. And I think just having those people around you makes a massive impact, whether you're going through a cancer battle or a mental health struggle, whatever it might be, or you're just stressed with workload. It's having people around you can really help.
100%.
I'd say I need to do more, but I think
I like the honesty.
I think the thing is, the people who were there with me, we just sort of moved on from it, and we haven't spoken about it enough. But I think the power of conversation is, I think, going back to the barriers thing, is that in a lot of men there's the grower pair. And I remember Nathan Adrian, while I was on treatment, who's a Olympic gold medalist and world record holder for swimming or something. He had testicular cancer and very big on the grow a pair, or grow some balls in situations. And when you're in that situation, like, you just feel like, right, I'm not masculine, then I differ from my friends. And I think that's the power of the conversation, is the minute it's said with someone, then it's so easy to talk about. But until you have the conversation, then it's not going to go as planned.
We might say the same thing.
No, I would just say it's interesting, the power of words. Like, the way you word certain things can really affect people. And I think that is something that's being looked at more in society now, is actually, let's not say to people, man up. Like, that, what's that even supposed to mean, So I think that is very interesting, the words thing.
We did a recent episode with two guys that are doing great stuff in the mental health space, or the mental wellbeing space, around support and providing safe spaces. And one of the questions we asked them is, what do they think the definition of masculinity is? And their both responses was being around being vulnerable, being like open. Like, one of them said that, their biggest growth was in vulnerable places. And yet the second one said about protection, but protection isn't just a physical thing. It's around like emotional, and like you said, Gwen said, how you use your words and stuff like that. Like, it's interesting how that masculinity kind of definition and what not stigma, but like what that is changed now. It used to be such a how much you lift in the gym, how massive you are, if you can fit through the door, like, we don't talk about anything. And now how that's evolved to be like, actually, if you're a 6 foot odd man, but being able to be really open with your emotions, like, respect that massively.
Yeah, 100%.
And also as well about putting yourself first sometimes, and understanding that to be able to show up as the best version of yourself for those around you, you have to sometimes put yourself first and actually work on yourself and work through that. Because I think it was Lloyd that touched on, protection isn't just about protecting those around you by just putting all your energy towards other people. It's about creating yourself and to be a good person for those around you as well.
I just wanted to touch on, ask you a question, but Jamie, but what advice would you give people that are listening? Like, what do you feel like you needed when you were 14? And what advice would you give now to those people if they were going through something that you did?
I would say there's two perspectives on it. You've got the first, which is, I don't think enough men check themselves until they're actually affected. And then that's the big issue, or they know something's wrong and they don't say anything. And the big thing is, a GP will see you no matter what, and both outcomes will be positive. Maybe not if you think in the first place, but you'll be treated or you'll be clear. And that's a massive thing, just to have that 5-minute consultation. But then also, I'd say a piece of advice is, it's the attitude. I'd say the minute you accept that you are 1-0 down in sort of the process of chemotherapy, then you're behind and you're going to play a very long game to get back. But staying positive, setting yourself targets, and even if it's silly stuff like just going to eat in the lunch, or it helps, because you wouldn't be able to do that situation, and you've beaten your objective for the day rather than just accepting what's happening.
Nice.
I love that. And I really do love the way that you talked at the beginning about that, making sure that you kept some kind of normality, because I think it could be so easy to let things like that slip. But the fact that you were like, no, I'm going to do this, just keeps that little bit of momentum and ultimately plays a really important role in sort of having that positive attitude and that outlook towards stuff.
So what is next now? What is next for the Oddballs Foundation? What have you got planned? Have you got anything in mind what you want to achieve? Like, what's the next big things for the foundation?
Yes, there's a couple of sort of ongoing projects that we've got going. One's very exciting, which I'll touch upon in a second. I suppose the continued growth of the Oddballs Foundation within the UK. That's always going to be, what we strive to do. We do run a big sports event called the Oddballs Foundation Festival. It's like a multi-sports festival. It's got men's and women's rugby sevens, men's and women's hockey, women's netball. We're going to be adding football, lacrosse and touch rugby next year. So it's become a pretty sizable event. I think this year we had, it was around 4,500 people at the event. So it's growing. We want to take that as far and wide as possible, get as many people to that event. But I suppose the exciting project that we're currently a matter of months away is we've actually partnered up with a charity in America called the Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation to launch our UK ambassador program in American universities.
Wow.
Amazing.
That's insane.
That's really cool.
So that's been going for a couple of years now in trying to get everything lined up to make it happen. But this September, we're going to have students out on the roads delivering our message into American high schools, businesses, professional sports clubs. That's going to be probably the next big venture.
That is cool.
Round of applause.
That is very cool. Very cool. Does that mean you're going to make a trip across the pond?
I will be in September.
going?
Yeah,
I was going to say, you've got to take Jamie with you. Come on.
he's coming.
There we go. It's on camera. You know you're going now.
Jamie, what's in your plans?
Make the most of the role over the next year. I think to have the privilege to be able to go into schools and workplaces and stuff to spread awareness and just make the most of any opportunity that comes my way to talk about it more and, be more back to it. It doesn't define me, but it just shapes me.
What are you studying?
Finance.
Oh.
Well.
Well, what do you want to do with the degree? Have you thought about it?
Well, I want to go into trading, so that's the plan, but we'll see.
Big money. Would you remember
when you
us?
do that,
Are you okay?
When you do that, can you just let me know any
and then you can
any
sponsor
tips?
the podcast, or you can hire us if you want.
I think
very
just sort of touching on Jamie's point there, like making the most of the role. For our ambassadors, we just had like an ambassador day, which is like our onboarding day. They all come together, meet the current ambassadors and all the new ones, meet each other. It's a great sort of way to get them upskilled, learn more about the charity and sort of make friendships ultimately. Like in any opportunity you get, just throw yourself into it. Because whether you're going into a business and delivering a presentation, you don't know who you're going to meet and where that's going to lead to. Particularly with sort of Jamie just starting this September, the one thing I would 100% say is that's a great attitude, and that's the attitude that we want from all of our ambassadors. Like just say yes to as many different opportunities as possible when you can, because you don't know what sort of door is going to open from that. Yeah,
one piece of advice I've been telling myself a lot lately is like you don't grow in comfortable places, and to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like you literally just said, that's one thing I've been trying to do recently is like say yes to things that would make me I'd be anxious about. I don't feel like I'm experienced enough to do that. But like you said, they're the people you meet, have those amazing conversations with. They're the things that you end up having new experiences from, and like how much you can grow as a person by doing something that is completely out of your comfort zone. So I love that piece of advice.
Love that. So we've got a closing tradition on this podcast where the last guest leaves a question for the next guest without knowing who it's going to be. So your question is, what would you like to say to you 1 week ago from today? Let me say that again.
But you didn't.
What would you? I just
right.
confused me. What would you say?
Words.
No, I did say it. What would you say to you from 1 week ago today? So you last week.
What would you say to yourself
last Friday?
Week? Have you learned
Just
any?
give you a bit of time to think.
Well,
sing
No.
have you taken any life? Have you learned any lessons in the last week, or is there something that you've experienced in the last week that you would have told yourself differently? I'm trying to just elaborate on my question.
I think from me, like personally, I work really well when I'm in routine. I like to get up early, go to the gym, and then after that I feel so fresh and like ready to go for the day. So I think like, although it can be difficult at times, get yourself out of bed, go and do that session, because the rest of your day is going to be, so much more productive, and you're going to, operate well. So I think just like trying to stick into that routine, even if you feel like you don't want to do it, get yourself up. You don't always have to go sort of like balls to the wall, pardon the pun, but just get up, get going, and keep doing it.
Yeah, nice.
That's a good question. Still thinking. I'd go with definitely staying positive with everything that you do. I think there's times when everything gets too much and you just go, all right, the easy route out is just to not deal with it. But I say, keep on just bettering myself each week. Do one thing that you wouldn't have done last week, and then that's the way that life improves.
Nice.
That is very good. Yeah, very nice.
And just to finish, just to round off this episode, where can people go for any advice or support if people are maybe have found something or struggling? Like, where can they get all the information from regarding the foundation?
Yeah, so we're very active on all platforms, social media wise. So if you just search in the Oddballs Foundation or at Oddballs FDN for foundation, you'll see any of our platforms there. We're very bright and colourful, so you'll hopefully recognise us. If not, www.theoddballsfoundation.com. Admittedly, the website is going through a bit of a revamp at the moment, but all the key information's on there. And yeah, if you ever just want to drop us a message, then you can find our email addresses on the website. And we're always replying to DMs and whatnot, so reach out to us.
Cool. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for making the 5 a.m. train. 5:30 train. We will buy you lunch. But it's been a really insightful conversation, and thank you both for being so open. And I'm sure that your openness and your honesty will help other people listening to the pod.
Yeah, massive respect. Number one, Kieran, the work you're doing to try and, tackle the stigma and help as many people as possible with the work you do at the foundation. And Jamie, just the maturity and the respect to have for not only what you've been through, but now your outlook on life and what your attitude is. Like I mentioned earlier, it could be so easy for you now to just be like, well, pity me, and this is the life I lived before, and I'm in awe of how mature you are and how you've handled it, and the respect for the attitude that you've got now. So thank you both for your time. It's been such a good conversation, and wish you the best of luck for these exciting plans you've got.
Yeah, thanks very much for having us. I think both of us have loved it. It's you guys have been very welcoming, and I think hopefully even if we've just resonated with one person today, then we've done our job. So
Jamie did get me crying.
Well done. Cheers, and remember
to keep saying it how it is.